They say family is everything. But what happens when the people you trust most treat you like nothing? I was 31, paying my parents' mortgage, supporting my family while my younger sister scrolled through life like a princess. And then one morning, I walked into our Virginia living room, ready to tell them I'd lost my job, only to find my bags packed. "You've worn out your welcome," my father said. No warning, no compassion, just cold betrayal. Can you imagine being kicked out of the home you pay for, by your own family? Keep watching, because what I did next changed everything. It was a Thursday morning, and the air outside still smelled faintly of late spring rain, soft, metallic, hopeful. I remember pausing before stepping through the front door of my childhood home. I had driven back from Arlington earlier that morning, rehearsing how I'd break the news. The job I'd poured my 20s into, gone. Laid off in a company restructuring. My savings could stretch a few months, but I needed their support, just until I landed back on my feet. Instead, I opened the door to silence and boxes, stacked in the hallway, by the stairs, even on the couch where I used to fall asleep watching movies with my little sister. My coat was still hanging by the door, my name in Sharpie on the storage bins, but it was like the house no longer recognized me. "April," my father said without looking up from the box he was taping shut. "You've worn out your welcome." I froze, fingers still curled around my keys. "What?" He stood. Edward Jensen, 62, once a warm man with laugh lines and paint under his nails, now cold marble and flannel. "It's time, you need to go." I looked toward my mother, Gloria. She sat at the dining table clutching a tea mug that must have gone cold long ago. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared down as if the wood grain told a better story than the daughter who paid her electric bill. And Chelsea, my sister, my parents' pride. 28, blonde, bored, thumb still scrolling her phone on the sofa, she didn't even blink. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, voice thin and sharp like a snapped violin string. "No joke," Dad said. "You've been here long enough." Long enough. I moved back home 5 years ago after Mom's health scare. They needed help. Financially, emotionally, logistically. I stepped in, took over the bills, paid off the late mortgage payments, canceled my lease and came home. Because family. "Dad, I pay the mortgage," I whispered. "You paid it, past tense," he said. "We're managing now." But they weren't. I saw the bank notices on the kitchen counter last week. I knew Mom's medications cost more than their insurance covered. I bought groceries, paid for Chelsea's online classes when she couldn't afford books, and now, "You're kicking me out?" I asked. Without warning, Mom flinched, a twitch in her jaw, but no words. "You can stay with friends," Dad said. "You're resourceful." And just like that, I was being erased. I didn't cry, not then. I just stood there as something inside me cracked quietly, perfectly. Not a shatter, more like the slow split of ice under pressure. "Fine," I said, because I knew I wouldn't beg. Not for space, not for love. I walked past Chelsea, whose legs were curled on the couch I had paid to reupholster. Her eyes didn't lift from her phone, but I heard the faintest breath of a laugh as I passed. A private joke, probably with herself. Upstairs, I packed a bag, just essentials. Laptop, toiletries, the little ceramic fox I'd made in second-grade art class. I left the rest, let them have it. My past, my linens, the books I'd lined on the shelf by genre and color. On the way out, my hand brushed the doorframe. My growth chart was still penciled there. April, age 9. Age 13. Age 17. It ended there, but I hadn't stopped growing. "Good luck," Dad muttered as I stepped out. "I won't need luck," I replied. And I didn't look back. By dusk, I was lying on a floral couch that smelled faintly of peppermint oil and Maxine's signature cinnamon spray. Her basement was cold but dry, quiet but humming with the distant whir of her dehumidifier. Maxine had always been more than a friend. She was a lighthouse. Steady, unapologetically blunt. We met back in college, 2 scholarship kids in a sea of old money and polished boots. She wore thrift store denim like armor and spoke like every sentence had teeth. But that night, she opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into the kind of hug you don't realize you need until your knees go weak. "They actually did it," I said against her shoulder. "They really threw me out." Maxine didn't answer right away, just guided me inside, took my bag, and handed me a mug of chamomile tea like it was an IV drip. "You're staying here, as long as you need. Don't argue." I didn't. Her basement wasn't much. A low ceiling, concrete floors with 2 mismatched rugs, and a futon beside a space heater, but it was sanctuary. And more than that, it was honest. No pretending here. No cold nods or silent betrayals. We stayed up until nearly 2 a.m., sprawled on the floor with a bottle of cheap wine, unpacking not my luggage but the years of invisible weight I'd carried. Because it wasn't just the eviction. It wasn't even just the mortgage payments. It was every small moment I had ignored. Like how Chelsea had once accidentally taken my car keys and gotten a parking ticket. Then Dad said, "Just pay it, you're the responsible one." Or how Mom would wait until I'd left the house to bake cookies with Chelsea because she said I always made a mess. Maxine listened, really listened. And then she laughed, not kindly. "You've been financing your own erasure," she said. "Girl, you paid their bills, kept their lights on, and they acted like you were a squatter." I shook my head. They didn't even try to justify it, just, "You've worn out your welcome," like I was some stranger crashing on their couch. Maxine leaned back on her elbows, eyes narrowing. "They've been benefiting from you for years, and now that you've hit a low point, they throw you out. That's not just cruel, that's tactical. They don't want to carry you, not even for a second." I swallowed hard. "It's like I was never really part of the family." "Maybe you were," she said. "Only as long as you were useful." The words landed heavy, like a diagnosis I hadn't wanted but somehow already knew. I wrapped the blanket tighter around me, feeling the hollow space in my chest where love used to live. Maxine stood and pulled a plastic bin from the corner. "Here," she said, tossing me a pair of oversized socks and one of her college hoodies. "This is phase 1. Rest. No hero moves. No paying bills that aren't yours. No reaching out to people who kicked you out." I hesitated. "What about their credit cards? I'm still on one of them, and the shared insurance. The utilities?" "Cancel everything," she said firmly. "You owe them nothing. April, you've been bailing out a ship that was never yours. Let it sink." That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling tiles, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love was earned by sacrifice, that if you gave enough, cared enough, helped enough, eventually you'd be seen. But I had given. I had helped. And all it got me was a duffel bag and an echoing silence. Maybe Maxine was right. Maybe this was the beginning of something, not the end. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't cry either, not anymore. There was a different kind of ache now, not heartbreak, not rage, resolve. The following weeks settled into a quiet rhythm. Wake up, brew coffee in Maxine's tiny kitchen, scour job boards, send tailored resumes, eat cold noodles from a thrifted bowl. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I tracked every application like it was a lottery ticket. I interviewed for things far beneath my qualifications, customer service gigs, data entry roles. And then one rainy Tuesday, my inbox chimed. A digital marketing firm downtown needed an operations coordinator. Mid-level, real salary, benefits. I barely remembered applying. The interview was 2 days later. I wore a blazer borrowed from Maxine's closet, navy blue, one button missing, but still dignified. The woman who greeted me, Lena, had sharp glasses and a kinder voice than I expected. She asked why I'd left my last job. I hesitated. "Company restructuring," I said, "and some personal shifts, but I'm rebuilding and I'm ready." She smiled like she understood more than I said aloud. 3 days after that, I got the call. I had the job, full-time, starting Monday. Maxine found me screaming into a pillow with joy. "Damn right you got it," she said, opening a bottle of sparkling cider like we'd won the Super Bowl. "They're lucky to have you." The first morning of work felt like stepping into someone else's life. The office was tucked between a bakery and a yoga studio, the kind of place where sunlight streamed through wide windows and plants thrived in every corner. The receptionist gave me a welcome bag with a company mug, pens, and a journal that read, "You belong here." I almost cried in the break room. The work was fast-paced but manageable. Budget tracking, vendor coordination, internal workflows. My brain kicked back into gear, and with it came something I hadn't felt in weeks: competence. On day 5, I met Arjun, the senior strategist, who slid into the chair across from me during lunch and asked, "So, are you always this calm under pressure, or is it an April thing?" I smiled. "You haven't seen me with a spreadsheet error at 4 p.m. yet." We laughed. Easy, natural. That Friday, I picked up the keys to a small apartment overlooking the James River. 3rd floor, creaky floorboards, 1 bedroom with windows that actually opened. It smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleaner. I stood in the center of the empty living room, just me and the echo, and whispered, "You're safe now." Moving in was a one-woman operation. Maxine helped with the heavier stuff, her ancient hatchback stuffed with bins and blankets. I bought a used couch and a kitchen table with mismatched chairs. I put up string lights and a shelf for my mugs. Every item in that space felt earned. One night, curled under a thrifted comforter, I opened my laptop to check my finances. The first paycheck had hit. It wasn't a fortune, but it was clean, untouched. No deductions for family phone plans, no mysterious Venmo requests from Chelsea labeled thanks. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened a new tab. I began the process of removing myself from everything. Credit cards, utility accounts, even the shared health plan my mother had begged me to just keep a while longer. I mailed certified letters, canceled automatic drafts, updated passwords. Every click was a reclaiming, but the silence from them didn't last. On a chilly morning in early March, my phone buzzed. A message from a blocked number. It was a screenshot of a past due notice, from a mortgage I hadn't paid in 2 months. The message simply read, "Thought you were responsible." No name, but I knew that tone. I didn't respond. I made tea instead and watched the river from my window. The water moved with a slow, certain grace. I liked that. It reminded me of something I hadn't had in a long time, peace. The first raise came 6 weeks in. I didn't expect it, not that soon. But when Lena called me into her office and said, "We're restructuring salaries. You've more than earned this," I felt something shift. It wasn't just the number on my paycheck. It was validation. For years, I'd worked myself raw behind the scenes, cleaning up other people's messes, absorbing debt that wasn't mine, staying quiet so others could stay comfortable. Now, here I was being seen for my effort, rewarded, not exploited. That Friday, I met Maxine at our usual wine bar. It was warm inside, a string-lit haven from the drizzly Richmond streets. I told her about the raise, the bonus, and she whooped so loudly the bartender clapped. "You know what this means," she said, raising her glass. "You get to stop playing their unpaid accountant. Burn it down, April, every connection, every link, gone." I nodded. I'd already started. That weekend, I sorted through my old mail, some of it still forwarding from the house I used to call home. I hadn't opened most of it, just stacked the envelopes in a shoebox. Mortgage notices, insurance renewal offers, even an alumni fundraiser in my name. I lit a candle, poured myself tea, and one by one, I shredded every unopened letter. With each rip, it felt like I was unbinding myself from their version of me, the compliant helper, the fallback option. Next, I updated my legal records, removed their address as my permanent residence, filed a request to disassociate from the shared credit account Mom had opened in my name when I was 22, updated my emergency contact to Maxine. It felt surgical, precise, necessary, and when it was done, I felt free. I celebrated the following Sunday by walking the river trail alone. Spring was inching in, buds on trees, kids in muddy sneakers chasing dogs. I sat on a bench watching the James move steadily by. I thought about everything that had happened in the past few months, being kicked out, losing my job, sleeping in a cold basement. And yet somehow here I was, upright, employed, smiling. Maybe trauma doesn't always look like weeping into a pillow. Sometimes it looks like silence in a sunlit room and realizing you're not waiting for anyone to come save you. That night I cooked pasta from scratch. Maxine came over with sourdough and a bottle of wine that actually required a corkscrew. "To fresh starts," she toasted. "To cutting the cord," I added. My phone buzzed once during dinner. A number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. The next morning I found a new envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Handwritten. Inside was a note scribbled in Chelsea's looping cursive. "You owe us for everything. Rent, years of food, shelter. You think you're above family now." There was no signature, just a printout of some bank transactions I barely recognized, my own contributions marked with question marks as if to mock me. They'd flipped the narrative. I held the paper with trembling fingers, not from fear, but fury. They were rewriting history. I snapped a photo of the envelope and every page inside. Then I opened a new file on my computer, titled it Defense. If they wanted war, they'd get the clean kind on paper with facts in a courtroom if needed. Maxine read the note that night and spat her wine. "They're calling you a freeloader, girl, you kept their lights on." "I'm done playing defense," I said quietly. "It's time to document everything. All the years I covered bills, my bank records, texts, every receipt. If they come for me legally, they won't find a helpless little girl anymore." She nodded. "Then we build your case." And we did. Every night that week, we sat at my kitchen table sorting records and compiling evidence. It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, legal ones, because sometimes the only way to stop someone from stealing your peace is to make it cost them. It started with a knock. One chilly Wednesday morning, just as I was pulling on my coat and about to head out the door, I saw it. My parents' names glowing on the screen of my phone. Missed call. Then another. Then a text from a number I hadn't saved but recognized immediately. Chelsea. "We need to talk. Outside." My stomach dropped. I peeked through the peephole. There she was, standing at the base of my building, arms crossed like she owned the pavement, her platinum ponytail tucked into a designer coat I knew she hadn't paid for. She saw the curtain shift and smirked. Smirked. That's what shook me. I hadn't seen her in months. Not since the day I was banished from the only home I knew. And now she stood there like it was her turn to give me a lecture. I didn't open the door. I didn't wave. I did what Maxine always said to do when someone tried to bait you into a fight. I documented. I grabbed my phone and recorded. Zoomed in through the glass. Got her pacing, arms flailing, mouthing something I couldn't hear. I screenshotted her messages. Timestamped the call log. This was no surprise visit. It was a performance. After 5 minutes of drama, she slid something under my door and walked off, not a backward glance. I waited until she was gone before I opened the envelope. Inside was a crudely drafted invoice, scribbled in pen on notebook paper. It listed items like 8 years of shelter and use of family car and groceries provided, each followed by an arbitrary dollar amount. Total owed, $42,000. At the bottom, she wrote, "If you don't pay, we'll get a lawyer. Consider this your final chance to make things right." Make things right. As if I hadn't spent years paying their mortgage while she lounged on my parents' couch, pretending to be a lifestyle influencer with no job and a selfie ring light paid for by my overtime. I folded the note neatly and placed it in a labeled binder. Then I picked up the phone. Angela Lee answered on the third ring. Her voice was cool, composed, the kind that makes people stand up straighter without realizing it. "Angela Lee, family law, how can I help?" "I need to protect myself," I said. "From my own family." 2 days later, we met in her office, a quiet space filled with books and soft lamps. I brought everything. Records, screenshots, bank statements, the fake invoice. She listened, flipping through the stack with surgical precision. "How long have you been financially supporting them?" she asked. "Since I was 25, I said. "I've paid over $70,000 in total. They're trying to say I owe them." Angela raised an eyebrow. "For shelter in a home you were literally paying for." "Exactly." She nodded slowly, then said the words I hadn't known I needed to hear. "You have grounds not only to defend yourself, but to demand repayment." We began drafting a formal response that same afternoon. A cease and desist letter for harassment, a summary of financial contributions, and a demand for repayment of unauthorized debt, things I'd covered for Chelsea without full consent, like her student loan payments that were quietly tacked onto my auto pay when she couldn't remember her login. Angela's tone never wavered. "You've enabled them for too long," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Now we show them where the line is. You're not just a daughter anymore, April. You're a creditor." That night, I sat in my apartment and reread every cruel message they'd sent, every manipulation, every guilt trip, and I let myself feel it, not the fear, but the fury, because somewhere along the way, they'd convinced me that my worth was measured in what I gave, that I could earn love if I just gave more, sacrificed more, stayed quiet longer. But I was done paying. This time, I was sending the bill. The legal packet went out on a Monday morning. Angela mailed it certified, priority, everything meticulous, everything traceable. Inside, a cease and desist, a formal accounting of contributions with documentation, and a demand letter requesting repayment of debts totaling $31,480. There was no flair, no drama, just truth, facts, line by line. Angela's final note was simple but clear. "Failure to comply or continued harassment will result in further legal action." And then quiet, too quiet. The days that followed stretched long and brittle. No calls, no surprise visits. No messages from unknown numbers pretending to be someone else. The usual online attacks from Chelsea's fake accounts even went dormant. But the stillness didn't feel like peace. It felt like a breath held before a storm. I tried to distract myself with work, scheduling campaigns, managing operations, joining my team for coffee runs that felt too light for the weight I was carrying. I smiled when needed. I focused when I could. But every night, I walked home with tension tight in my shoulders, half expecting to find someone waiting by my door. Instead, I found nothing. Just the whisper of wind across the hallway and the glow of my string lights waiting inside. On day 5 of the silence, I walked to work through snow-dusted sidewalks, the city glazed in frost. I paused on the bridge over the James River and watched ice melt at the edges of the current. Even the river looked restless. My phone buzzed just before noon. It was Angela. "They signed for the letter 3 days ago," she said. "No response yet." "Is that good or bad?" I asked, not sure which I was hoping for. "Neither," she replied. "But it's often the quiet ones who erupt. Be alert." That evening, I bought pepper spray and programmed my local precinct's non-emergency line into my favorites. I wasn't afraid, not exactly, but I was done being surprised. 3 nights later it came. A pounding on my door, not a knock, a fist, over and over. I didn't need to look, I knew that rhythm, my father. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and hit record before stepping toward the door but not opening it. "April." His voice boomed, hoarse and hot with rage. "Come out here right now." I didn't answer, just stood behind the door recording. "You think you can see your own family," he shouted. "You ungrateful after everything we did for you." Behind his voice, I heard someone, my mother, saying something muffled, trying to pull him back. "You're lying," he yelled, slamming his hand against the door. "You didn't pay for anything, that was charity, you were never even." Silence. The kind that lands like a bomb. I froze, heart hammering. Never even what? Then his voice dropped. "You think you're better than us now, with your lawyer and your apartment and your city job. You're not, you never were." That was enough. I called the police. When they arrived, 2 officers in calm blue, they asked me to stay inside. I handed over my phone with the recording. Through the peephole, I watched my father gesturing wildly, face red, my mother beside him like a shadow. They left in a squad car. Not under arrest, just removed. The officers returned my phone, told me I did the right thing, and added, "You should consider getting a restraining order." That night, I sat on my bed, knees drawn to my chest, staring at the dent his fist left in my door. For a while, I felt nothing. Then something cracked, not fear, not grief, clarity. They were never going to see me for who I was. Not the daughter, not the helper, not the bridge. To them, I had always been a tool, useful when silent, dangerous when awake. And now I was awake. The police bodycam footage, Angela later confirmed, would strengthen our case. And more importantly, it shifted our legal position. Because in all his shouting, my father had just denied every payment I'd made. Which meant Angela could now investigate the financial trail. Which meant discovery. Which meant I wasn't the only one about to be exposed. The day after the police incident, Angela and I met again in her office, except this time she wasn't sitting calmly behind her desk. She stood at the whiteboard, uncapped marker in hand, scrawling dates, dollar signs, and names like she was diagramming a crime scene. "Your father's outburst is a legal gift," she said, underlining the words, "You didn't pay for anything," in blocky letters. "Because now we can prove he's lying." She pulled a file from the drawer and handed me a copy of my old bank statement, one I hadn't seen in years. "There's something off here," she said, tapping the page. "See this auto payment?" I squinted at the line. It was a payment to Southeastern Lending Group listed as a second mortgage, dated 18 months ago. "I never authorized that," I said. "I don't even know what that is." Angela nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She made a call while I sat in stunned silence, watching her request documentation from the lending agency. Within the hour, she had a scanned copy of the loan paperwork, PDFs with digital signatures, notarizations, income verifications. And there it was, my name, my signature, on a loan I had never seen before. Angela turned the monitor to face me, her voice low and even. "This is fraud, April. This isn't just a financial disagreement anymore. This is a felony." I leaned closer, heart racing. It looked like my signature, but something was off. The curl on the J was too high, the tail of the A too long. I knew my handwriting the way an artist knows her brushstrokes. This was close, but not mine. "Your father forged your name," Angela confirmed. "He took out a second line of credit under both your names, probably assuming you'd never notice. Likely used your information from previous shared documents, social, employment records, all of it." The rage that washed over me was ice cold. He hadn't just thrown me out. He'd buried me in debt on the way out the door. Angela began the process of reporting the fraud. We filed a dispute with the lender, froze any associated activity, and contacted the credit bureaus. She drafted an affidavit for the police. This would now be a criminal investigation, not just civil. "I want you to be prepared," she said carefully. "This may escalate." I nodded. "Let it." That night, back in my apartment, I stared at the scan of that forged document. What shook me most wasn't the fraud itself. It was how confident he must have been that I'd never fight back. I spent hours at my kitchen table, combing through every financial record I could access. I found 2 more questionable charges. One was a family medical loan I had never agreed to signed in the same suspicious script. The second, a cash-out refinance from 4 years ago, also in my name. It wasn't just betrayal, it was identity theft. I met Maxine for coffee the next morning and told her everything. Her face went white, then flushed with fury. "He used your life to build his lie," she whispered. "This isn't just about money, this is erasure." And it was. He'd stolen not just dollars, but trust, credibility, opportunity. My credit score had been weaponized. My name turned into a pawn, but not anymore. Angela added the forged documents to our growing legal arsenal. She contacted the state attorney general's office. This was no longer just a family spat. This was criminal fraud. I got a call from the detective 2 days later. He was courteous, professional, but his voice held weight. "Miss Jensen, we'll need a formal statement," he said. "We're opening a file. If we find additional evidence, your father may be facing charges." I stared out my apartment window after we hung up, watching 2 kids chase each other down the block in puffy coats. I wondered if they'd grow up believing their parents would always protect them. I used to believe that too. Now I knew better. Now I knew survival sometimes meant exposing the very roots you grew from, and sometimes it meant burning the family tree, just to step into the sun. It was surreal how normal the courthouse looked. Just brick and concrete, a building you wouldn't glance at twice, until you realized your entire past was about to be laid bare inside it. Angela walked beside me through security, her heels clicking in steady rhythm. "Just remember," she said, "you've done nothing wrong. This is your truth, backed by receipts." Inside, the room was smaller than I expected. Sterile walls, uncomfortable benches, a faint buzz from fluorescent lights. But the weight of it pressed down like a mountain. And then they entered. My father, flanked by his attorney, a man with too much gel in his hair and too few answers. My mother followed, head lowered, as if trying to disappear into her own coat. They didn't look at me. Not once. The hearing was procedural, an initial step to present the fraud evidence and confirm the investigation. But the moment the forged documents were displayed on the screen, the room's temperature seemed to shift. Angela stood with quiet power. "These signatures," she said, "do not match Ms. Jensen's known legal signature. Furthermore, the documents in question were processed without her consent, and all funds were deposited into accounts controlled solely by Edward Jensen." The opposing counsel objected, said they needed time to verify the records. Angela anticipated it. "We've already submitted copies to the district attorney's office. A police investigation is active. Ms. Jensen is not here to argue feelings. She's here because her name was stolen by her father." I saw him flinch then, a micro-expression, a twitch in his jaw. The judge paused before speaking. "Given the evidence presented and the potential criminal implications, I'm referring this case for further review." It wasn't a verdict, but it was validation. Outside, the sky was iron gray, and a wind swept through the parking lot that made me pull my coat tighter. I didn't see them coming until they were almost beside me. My father's voice. "April, wait." I turned. There was something different in his eyes, not rage, not defiance, something smaller, fear. "You think I meant to hurt you?" he asked. This got out of hand. I needed to protect what I had left." I stared at him. "You mean protect your lies?" He didn't answer. My mother stood silently beside him. Her eyes were red, but not from tears. From exhaustion, maybe, or shame. "Do you know what you cost me?" I asked. My voice didn't rise. "Need to." "Years of debt. A credit score trashed. Nights sleeping in a friend's basement after you tossed me out. And for what? So Chelsea could keep her nail appointments while I paid your mortgage." My father looked away. And then softly he said something I didn't expect. "You were never your mother's daughter." Silence. My pulse slowed, thudded. "What?" He didn't look up. "Gloria, she wasn't your mother, not by blood. I met her when you were barely 2. She raised you, but she never really accepted you, not the way she did Chelsea." My world tilted. "She died," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "When you were little cancer, fast, I didn't know how to raise a baby alone. Gloria stepped in, but she never bonded with you, not like with Chelsea. I let it happen. I let her push you out." The ground beneath me felt slippery, unreal. "You let her treat me like I was disposable. I thought if I kept things going, paid the bills, held the family together, it'd be enough. But you kept giving, and it made me look worse." I almost laughed. So your solution was to forge my name and bury me in debt. He winced. I was weak. The truth hit like sleet against bare skin, freezing, blinding, and somehow clarifying because I saw it now. It had never been about me not being enough. It had always been about them not knowing how to love someone who didn't demand nothing. I stepped back, breath visible in the cold. I forgive you, I said softly. Not for you, for me. So I can walk away without dragging your shame behind me like a suitcase. He opened his mouth, but I was already turning. Angela was waiting by the car, expression unreadable. You okay? I nodded once. I will be. As we drove off, I watched the courthouse fade in the rearview mirror. It was strange how little it looked like a battlefield. And yet, that's exactly what it was. And I had survived it. The silence afterward didn't feel like the kind I feared. It felt earned. There were no more knocks on my door. No surprise texts, just space. Glorious, guiltless space. For the first time in years, my weekends weren't scheduled around someone else's needs. I reclaimed my time the way I'd reclaimed my finances, with care, with intention, and without apology. I began therapy at Maxine's gentle insistence. You need a space where no one interrupts you, she'd said. No one rewrites your history while you're still living it. My therapist, Dr. Sloan, was sharp but kind, the kind of woman who nodded deeply when you spoke, like she was agreeing with your bones rather than your words. Tell me about your earliest memory of being the helper, she asked one morning, legs crossed, pen still. I didn't even blink. Age 9, Chelsea had the flu. I made dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and tucked her in while my parents argued upstairs. No one noticed. Except you, she said. You noticed. We talked about the danger of being the strong one for too long. How it teaches people to rely on your silence instead of your boundaries. How that strength can become a trap disguised as virtue. Some days I left our sessions feeling unburdened. Other days I cried all the way home. But always I felt lighter. I painted again, too. Pulled out old brushes from a milk crate I hadn't touched since college. I started small, watercolors of the river, then oil portraits from memory. Faces I'd loved, faces I'd lost. Maxine came over one night and gasped at a piece leaning against my bookshelf. Did you paint that? I shrugged, suddenly shy. Just something I did after work. It's stunning, she said, stepping closer. She looks like you, but older, wiser. I hadn't realized until then that I'd painted my future self. Work flourished, too. I wasn't just competent anymore, I was thriving. Lena promoted me again, quietly, with a wink and a hug. You've stabilized this whole department, she said. People feel safe because you show up. Those words hit me in the chest. Because that's what I'd always done, hadn't I? Show up. For everyone else. Only now I was showing up for me. One Sunday, I took myself on a solo day date. Just me, a sketchpad, and the sound of the James River curling around its bends. I sat in the grass near the overlook, watching families pass by, dogs chasing leaves, joggers with wireless headphones lost in their rhythm. And then out of nowhere came a voice I hadn't heard in months. April. I looked up and there she was, Chelsea, alone. She wore oversized sunglasses and an expression I couldn't read. Hesitant, maybe even ashamed, I stood, cautious but curious. What are you doing here? I didn't know you came here, she said. I just needed air. I didn't think I'd see you. A long silence stretched between us. I'm not here to fight, she added quickly, or to blame you for anything. I waited, sighed, tugging her sleeves down. They're struggling. Mom doesn't talk much. Dad barely leaves the house. The investigation's not going well, and the family's splintered. I said nothing, not because I didn't care, but because I had nothing left to give them. I didn't know about the loan, she said. About what he did with your name, I swear. I believe you, I said softly. Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast. I said horrible things, did worse. I think I was trying to hurt you before you left me. But you didn't leave me, did you? I left you a long time ago. I nodded. Yes, you did. She wiped her cheek and tried to smile. Are we ever going to be okay again? I looked at the water, at the way the current carried everything forward, never back. I don't know, I said honestly. But I hope you find your own life, not the one they built around you. We stood in the cold silence for a moment longer. Then she nodded, turned, and walked away. And I didn't chase her. Because forgiveness isn't always reunion. Sometimes it's just letting go without hate. Spring arrived subtly, like a gentle apology for everything winter had bruised. By April, my namesake month, I'd fallen into a rhythm. Wake early, brew strong coffee, walk barefoot through my small apartment and stretch in the sun that poured through my east-facing windows. Life no longer felt like something I was managing. It felt like something I was choosing. The court case had grown quieter, moving through slow judicial machinery. Angela assured me it was normal. Sometimes justice doesn't move fast, she said, but when it lands hard. I didn't ask for updates anymore. I didn't need them. My life wasn't waiting on a verdict. My healing wasn't contingent on punishment. Then on a rainy Thursday afternoon, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. I nearly threw it away until I saw the blocky handwriting. Slanted left. Bold, familiar. It was from him, my father. I sat on my couch, the envelope unopened in my hand, watching water trace patterns down the glass. I wasn't sure I even wanted to read it. But curiosity is a strange thing. It crawls into your chest and refuses to leave. I opened it. There were no pleasantries, no "Dear April," just sentences, jagged, blunt. I told you something outside the courthouse that day, about your mother, but I didn't tell you everything. I felt my breath catch. Gloria wasn't just cold to you. She resented you, from the beginning. She said you reminded me too much of your real mother, your birth mom. I should have told you sooner, but I was afraid it would wreck everything. And then it did anyway. I read the words again, slowly, like they might change. Your mother, her name was Eliza. She was kind, creative. We weren't together long, but I loved her. She got sick fast. I never told you much because it always hurt too much to say it out loud. But she loved you. I have proof. Letters, photos. I found them in the attic after Gloria left. I froze. Gloria left. Chelsea doesn't know any of this. I never told her. I didn't think it mattered. But maybe it does. You deserved more than silence. I'm sorry I failed you. I was weak. I still am. But I hope someday you'll let someone else tell you more about Eliza. Her sister, your aunt, tried to reach me once, years ago. I never answered. She lives in Asheville. Her name is Claire. She might still be there. That was it. No love, Dad. No signature, just a truth I hadn't expected and didn't know what to do with. I sat with it for hours. Let the words curl around my spine, unsettle everything I thought I'd finally settled. Eliza, not Gloria. The mother I never knew but who had written letters, photos, an aunt. I hadn't just been pushed out of a family, I'd been cut off from a whole other one. One that might have wanted me, loved me, missed me. The idea felt like wind through a locked room. That night I called Maxine and read her the letter. She was silent for a long time, then said, "You need to go." "Go where?" "To Asheville or wherever Claire is. You need answers, April. You've lived too long inside other people's versions of your story." I laughed softly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," she said. "It's just necessary." I didn't decide that night, but I left the letter on my dresser where I'd see it every morning. And something about its presence made the air feel charged, like a chapter waiting to be written. Meanwhile, Angela called 2 days later with an update. "The DA has enough," she said. "They're moving forward with criminal charges against your father, forgery, financial fraud, identity theft." My chest tightened, but not from fear, from relief. She paused. "He's refusing a plea deal, says he wants to speak in court." "To say what?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I want you prepared. Sometimes people don't go down quietly." I nodded. "Let him talk," because I had already said my piece. Not in shouting or legalese, but in boundaries, in healing, in choosing to build a life that didn't require their approval. I spent the weekend cleaning my apartment, not out of anxiety but readiness. I packed a small bag, looked up flights to Asheville. If Claire existed, if Eliza's memory still lived somewhere in the hills of North Carolina, I would find it. Because the truth wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine to carry, and I was strong enough now to lift it. The courtroom was smaller than before, tighter somehow, maybe because the weight I carried was now inside me, not draped over my shoulders. I wore navy, not to be symbolic, just because it made me feel solid. Angela stood beside me as we waited for my father to take the stand. The DA had offered him a plea deal weeks ago, reduced charges in exchange for a full confession. He'd declined. "He wants the last word," Angela warned. "But remember, you've already spoken your truth. No one else can unwrite it now." When he entered the courtroom, I didn't flinch. He looked older, not just tired but faded, like a man haunted by his own reflection. The tie he wore was wrinkled. His shoes, once so polished, scuffed around the edges. The judge asked if he had anything to say. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement." Permission granted. He stood, eyes scanning the room, never quite landing on mine. "I didn't intend for things to get this far," he began. "When April moved back in, she helped us. Yes, and I took advantage, but not out of malice." He turned toward the judge. "I was drowning, bills, mistakes, pressure I couldn't escape. And she, April, was always the responsible one, always the fixer. I thought she'd understand. I thought." His voice cracked. "I didn't think she'd fight me." He paused, looked down, then finally up at me. You were always more than I deserved. There it was, not an apology, not really, but something small, something cracked open. And I realized sitting there that I didn't need anything else from him, not remorse, not understanding. I had built something beyond his comprehension, a life rooted not in permission but in truth. The judge moved forward with sentencing. Probation, financial restitution, community service. It was more than symbolic, it was structural. When court adjourned, I didn't approach him. He didn't reach out either. And that was how our story ended, not with a hug, not with reconciliation, but with clarity. Angela and I walked outside into bright morning sun. For once, Richmond air didn't feel heavy with memory. It felt clean. Later that week, I boarded a flight to Asheville, just a carry-on bag and the letter in my purse. The town was warm, nestled in soft green hills. The air tasted like spring and mountain soil. I found Claire's address through a public records search. It was easier than I expected, and somehow that made me cry, as if the universe was saying it's time. Her house was small, pale yellow with wind chimes dancing near the porch. I stood there for a full minute before knocking. She opened the door slowly, eyes narrowing. Gray hair pulled into a loose braid, cardigan sleeves pushed up. Then her face changed. April, I nodded. She opened her arms. We sat in her sunroom for hours, sipping sweet tea and trading pieces of a puzzle neither of us thought we'd ever finish. She showed me photos, faded but precious, of my birth mother, Eliza. Smiling wide, brush in hand, freckles splashed across her nose, an artist, a dreamer, someone who wore joy like a second skin. She wanted you to know her, Claire said softly. She left letters for you, but he never wrote back. I held one of the envelopes in my lap, my name scrawled in looping ink. I didn't open it then. I wanted to be alone with it. Later, back at a small cabin I'd rented, I sat on the porch in the hush of twilight and finally read my mother's words. My darling April, if you're reading this, then you found your way back to something true. I'm sorry I couldn't stay to see the woman you'd become. But I know you. I know you're strong. Not just the kind of strong that holds things together for others, but the kind that knows when to let go. Live wild. Love big. And never let someone else write your story for you. I wept. Not out of sorrow, out of arrival. Out of knowing I had walked through the fire and not only survived, but emerged as someone new. Someone whole. So here's where I leave you. I lost a family, yes. But I gained something rarer, myself. I fought for my name, my voice, my truth. And now when I look in the mirror, I don't see a daughter who disappointed or a sister who strayed. I see a woman who reclaimed her story, one chapter at a time. And this one I wrote for me.